On a peaceful Saturday evening, the serene atmosphere of Silver Heights, an upscale neighborhood known for its luxurious homes and neatly trimmed lawns, was disturbed. Monica Johnson, an African-American FBI agent, had only moved in a week ago. She wasn't just any woman in gym clothes enjoying her run. She was someone who had cracked some of the toughest cases in the bureau. For her, running wasn't just exercise, it was therapy. The evening breeze was gentle, the streets lit softly by garden lights. Monica smiled to herself as she jogged past cheerful children playing on the lawn, their laughter warming the air. It reminded her why she had chosen this neighborhood, a place that promised peace, but peace, she realized, was often fragile. As Monica turned a quiet corner, the sharp sound of a police siren shattered the calm. Startled, she paused, turning to see a police car parked abruptly across the street. A white officer, stern-faced, and in his mid-40s, stepped out, his gaze fixated on her like a hawk spotting prey. "Excuse me," he said, his tone sharp and devoid of friendliness. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Monica straightened her posture. She had faced situations like this before, but it never failed to sting. The color of her skin always seemed to provoke suspicion in places she had every right to be. "I'm just jogging, officer," she replied calmly, her voice firm but respectful. The officer's frown deepened as he stepped closer, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Jogging here?" His tone carried disbelief. "Do you live in this neighborhood? I don't think I've seen you before." Monica's jaw tightened, but she remained composed. "Yes, I just moved in. My house is on Maple Street, right around the corner." His arms crossed over his chest, his posture stiff with doubt. "Maple Street, huh? Which house? Can you prove it?" The question hit Monica like a slap. She had lived her entire life proving her worth, and here she was again, being asked to justify her presence in her own neighborhood. The rage simmered within her, but years of FBI training reminded her to stay calm. Confrontation wouldn't serve her now. "I don't carry house papers while jogging," she said, her voice steady, though her patience wore thin. "But you're welcome to follow me home if that's what it takes." The officer seemed caught off guard by her response, but didn't back down. Monica, however, wasn't about to let fear guide her. She knew the power she held, not just as an agent, but as someone who refused to let prejudice define her. As the tension hung in the air, a small crowd began to gather, neighbors drawn by the flashing lights and raised voices. Among them was a young black boy holding his mother's hand. His wide eyes stared at Monica, a mix of curiosity and fear. Monica met his gaze, silently vowing that he would grow up in a world where moments like this became a relic of the past. The officer finally stepped back, though his suspicion lingered in his eyes. Monica didn't wait for his approval. She turned and jogged away, her head held high. Every step reminded her why she fought for justice, why she endured moments like this, not just for herself, but for every person of color who deserved to live without suspicion shadowing their every move. Back home, Monica sat on her porch, catching her breath. The stars above sparkled, indifferent to the day's events. For Monica, they symbolized something greater, a reminder that even in the darkest of moments, there was light to guide the way. Monica Johnson stood her ground, her calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside her. The badge on the officer's chest read Blake Carter, but his actions screamed of something far removed from duty. "Listen, Blake," Monica began, her voice steady but unyielding. "Jogging in my neighborhood doesn't warrant an interrogation. I pay taxes just like anyone else here. You're crossing a line." Blake smirked, his arms crossing defensively. "People, like you think you can say anything, don't you? But I've been here for years. I keep this place safe, and I know when someone doesn't belong." The words hit Monica like a cold wind. "People like you." She had heard it too many times before, and every time it carried the same weight of prejudice. "You mean people like me?" Monica said, her eyes locking with his. "Let's not pretend that this isn't about the color of my skin." Blake's expression faltered for a moment, then hardened again. Don't play that card with me, he snapped. This is about safety. Monica's fingers brushed against the small hidden camera on her gym clothes, ensuring it was still recording. She knew Blake's words and actions were more than just a personal attack. They were part of a system she had fought her whole life to expose. If this is about safety, Monica countered, then why am I being treated like a threat in my own neighborhood? I thought your job was to serve and protect, not to intimidate and harass. Blake's face reddened, and he took a step closer. Don't tell me how to do my job, he growled. You want to live here peacefully, then you cooperate. Otherwise, I can't promise there won't be trouble. Monica felt her fists clench, her patience wearing thin. Blake's veiled threats weren't new to her, but they still stung. She had dealt with criminals, liars, and manipulators, but facing this kind of hostility in her own community was a different kind of battle. You're overstepping your authority, Monica said, her voice low but filled with warning. You may wear a badge, but that doesn't give you the right to harass people. You're not above the law, Officer Carter. Blake let out a mocking laugh. You think you can lecture me? Let me tell you something. I've seen what people like you bring to neighborhoods like this. I've seen how things change when we let our guard down, so don't think you can waltz in here and tell me how to do my job. Monica's heart pounded, but she refused to show any fear. She stared at him, unwavering, as he tried to intimidate her. I've spent my entire career standing up to bullies and abusers, she said calmly. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. For a moment, the tension between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. The sound of the hidden camera recording felt louder in Monica's mind, a small reassurance that she wasn't entirely powerless. Just then, a door creaked open nearby, and a neighbor stepped out, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair who had been watching from her porch. Is there a problem here? The woman called out, her voice firm. Blake turned to her, his posture stiffening. Just handling a security check, ma'am. Nothing to worry about. The woman frowned. She's jogging, Blake. I saw her pass by earlier. She's not a stranger here. Monica glanced at the woman, grateful for the unexpected ally. Blake looked flustered for the first time, his authority undermined in front of a witness. Fine, he muttered. Just doing my job. As Blake turned and walked back to his car, Monica stood silently, watching him retreat. The encounter wasn't over, not really. The recording in her hidden camera would ensure that his actions didn't go unnoticed. The neighbor approached Monica with a kind smile. You handled that well. If you ever need someone to back you up, I'm just across the street. Thank you, Monica said, her voice soft but resolute. I'll remember that. As the night deepened, Monica walked back home, her steps slow but deliberate. She wasn't just fighting for herself. Every moment like this was a reminder of the larger battle, a fight for dignity, for equality, and for the right to exist without fear. In her living room, Monica reviewed the footage from her hidden camera. The truth was there, captured in every word and action, and she knew that soon, Blake Carter would have to answer for his abuse of power. The stars outside shone faintly, a quiet reminder of resilience. Monica knew this was just the beginning of her stand against the shadows of racism, both in her neighborhood and beyond. Blake's disdain was no longer hidden, his every move oozing contempt. Monica stood firm, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing in front of her. She could see through him. This wasn't just personal animosity. This was a symptom of a much larger, broken system. Blake stepped closer, his voice low and menacing, as he implied his demand for protection money. His words carried a sinister undertone that turned Monica's stomach. She knew exactly what he was suggesting and couldn't believe his audacity. The breeze seemed to pause as Monica locked eyes with him. Her anger simmered beneath the surface, but her years of training kept her from reacting impulsively. This wasn't just about her safety. This was about standing up to someone who abused their authority to perpetuate a cycle of fear and oppression. Blake's sneer deepened as he continued to press her. His words were a blatant abuse of power, filled with the kind of arrogance that came from believing he was untouchable. Monica's fists tightened at her sides, but she remained poised. Her sharp mind raced to assess the situation, knowing she had to keep her composure, not just for herself, but for the truth she was quietly capturing. The hidden camera on her shirt recorded every sneer, every hateful word, and every threatening gesture. Blake's anger intensified when he realized Monica wasn't intimidated. His tone grew harsher, his words sharper, as he tried to belittle and threaten her. But Monica stood her ground, her back straight, and her expression unwavering. She didn't need to shout or argue. Her quiet confidence spoke louder than any words. Blake's fury boiled over, and in a moment of reckless rage, he stepped back and pulled his gun from its holster. The world seemed to freeze. The glint of the weapon caught. The fading sunlight, a harsh reminder of how quickly per order. Monica's heartbeat quickened, but her training kept her thoughts clear. She didn't flinch or step back. She stood tall, her eyes locked on Blake. This wasn't the first time she had faced danger, but it was the first time it had come so close to home. Blake's face twisted with anger and desperation, his grip tightening on the gun. He wanted to assert control, but in Monica's calm, unyielding gaze, he saw something he couldn't break: strength. Time stretched as the tension between them grew unbearable. Monica's mind stayed sharp, analyzing every possible move. She knew she had to de-escalate without giving Blake the satisfaction of seeing fear. The weight of the moment was palpable. But Monica wasn't alone. The hidden camera silently captured everything, turning Blake's threats into undeniable evidence. Suddenly, the distant sound of a door opening broke the silence. A neighbor had stepped outside, drawn by the commotion. Blake hesitated, his posture faltering as he glanced toward the figure in the distance. Monica seized the moment. With a voice steady and firm, she said, "You need to stop this now." Her words carried authority, not fear, and Blake froze. For the first time, Blake seemed unsure. The presence of another witness, combined with Monica's unshakable resolve, forced him to reconsider his actions. He lowered the gun, his face still twisted with anger, but now tinged with uncertainty. Monica exhaled slowly, her body still tense, but her mind focused. She had held her ground, but she knew this encounter was far from over. The truth was on her side, and she would ensure that Blake's actions didn't go unchallenged. As Blake retreated, Monica remained standing, her eyes following him until he disappeared into the distance. The neighbor, still watching from their porch, gave a nod of acknowledgement before going back inside. Monica finally turned and began walking home. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she knew she couldn't let this weigh her down. The fight for justice was never easy, but it was a fight worth taking on, one step, one moment, one act of courage at a time. That night, as she reviewed the footage from her hidden camera, Monica felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel unwelcome because of the color of their skin. The stars outside were faint but constant, a quiet reminder of resilience. Monica knew that standing up against injustice was never simple, but it was necessary. And no matter how many shadows tried to silence her, the truth would always find its way to the light. Blake's hand trembled as he aimed the gun at Monica. His arrogance, fueled by years of unchecked power, faltered slightly in the face of her unwavering calm. For many, the sight of a loaded weapon would have triggered fear, but Monica's years as an FBI agent had trained her for moments like this. She raised her hand slowly, signaling she wasn't a threat, and spoke in a measured tone that carried both authority and control. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life, Officer Blake," she said, her words precise, cutting through the tension like a blade. Blake's laugh was cold and unsteady, a facade of confidence that was quickly unraveling. "You don't understand," he sneered. "This is my world. You're just an outsider here." Monica didn't flinch. She nodded, her eyes locked on his, her every move deliberate. "You're right about one thing, Blake," she said calmly, her voice like steel. "You don't know who I am." From her side pocket, she pulled out her FBI badge, holding it up for him to see. The emblem gleamed under the fading light, a stark reminder of the authority she carried. "I'm Agent Monica Johnson, Federal Bureau of Investigation," she stated, her voice steady but firm. "And everything you've said and done is recorded." Blake froze, his face draining of color. The arrogance in his eyes gave way to fear as realization set in. The gun in his hand wavered, his confidence slipping through his fingers like sand. "You've crossed the line," Monica continued, her words sharp and deliberate. "And you will be held accountable for your actions. Lower your weapon now, before you make this any worse." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Blake's grip on the gun tightened, his eyes darting between Monica and the badge. The weight of her words, and the evidence she carried, crushed the last vestiges of his bravado. With a shaky hand, Blake lowered the weapon, his movements clumsy and uncertain. The gun slid back into its holster as sweat dripped down his face. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice trembling. Monica didn't let him finish. With a swift motion, she pulled out her phone and dialed the local police chief. Her voice was calm but firm as she relayed the events. "This officer just abused his power, threatened me with a weapon, and displayed clear racial bias," she said, her words leaving no room for ambiguity. "I'll be submitting video evidence shortly. Send a patrol car immediately." When she ended the call, Blake stood motionless, his arrogance stripped away, replaced by the weight of what he'd done. Monica's gaze remained sharp as she gestured toward the sidewalk. "Sit down," she ordered. "Wait for the officers to arrive. You'll have your chance to explain everything in court." Defeated, Blake sank onto the curb, his head bowed. He looked up at Monica, his eyes pleading, but she didn't waver. This wasn't a moment for sympathy. It was a moment for justice. Minutes later, the sound of a patrol car approaching broke the silence. Red and blue lights flashed against the growing dusk, a visual reminder that the system, though flawed, could still be made to work. Monica stepped back as two officers exited the vehicle. She handed over her badge and provided a brief explanation, along with the recorded footage. The officers exchanged looks before turning to Blake, who now looked like a man stripped of all power. As they cuffed him, Monica felt a small sense of relief. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot, but this was a step forward, a step toward holding those in power accountable. Blake was led to the patrol car, his head hanging low, while Monica stood watching, her expression resolute. She had seen too many moments like this in her career, but each one was a reminder of why she did what she did. The night settled over Silver Heights as the patrol car pulled away. Monica turned and began her walk home, her pace steady, her resolve unshaken. This was more than just an encounter. It was a stand against the prejudice and corruption that so many faced. And as Monica walked through the quiet streets, she knew that the fight for justice wasn't just about one neighborhood or one moment. It was about creating a future where everyone could run free, without fear, no matter the color of their skin. The red and blue lights painted the quiet street as the patrol car's siren faded into the evening air. Monica stood motionless, her eyes fixed on Blake, who now sat slumped on the sidewalk. His once aggressive demeanor had crumbled into quiet humiliation. The two officers who had stepped out of the car exchanged confused glances. The male officer, tall with a cautious air, addressed Monica. "What's going on here?" Monica reached into her pocket and pulled out her badge. Holding it firmly, she stepped forward. "I am Special Agent Monica Johnson with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This officer, Blake Carter, abused his authority, harassed me and threatened me with a weapon while I was jogging in the neighborhood. I have video evidence to support my statement." The female officer, a petite yet sharp-eyed woman, nodded briskly. "We'll handle this, Agent Johnson," she said. "Perhaps you should wait in the patrol car while we question him." Monica shook her head firmly. "I'll stay here. I want to ensure everything is documented and handled properly. Blake raised his head, anger and desperation flickering in his red-rimmed eyes. This is my territory, he snarled. You don't know who she is. She's making this up. Monica didn't flinch. She met his gaze with a calm but unyielding expression. You should confess, Blake, she said, her voice like ice. Everything you've said and done has been recorded. The female officer approached Blake, her tone cold and authoritative. Stand up, Blake. You are under arrest. If you have anything to say, save it for your attorney. Blake hesitated for a moment, his body tense, but eventually rose to his feet. His hands trembled as the officers cuffed him and led him to the patrol car. He didn't speak, his defiance replaced by a defeated silence. Monica watched as the car door shut behind him. A flicker of pity surfaced in her heart, but it was quickly overshadowed by the satisfaction of knowing that accountability had finally caught up with him. Later that evening, Monica stood in the makeshift interrogation room at the Silver Heights precinct. Across from her was Police Chief David Harper, a middle-aged man with greying hair and a stern face. His expression carried a mix of tension and weariness as he spoke. Agent Johnson, he began, his voice measured. I've been briefed on the situation. Can you show me the evidence? Without a word, Monica removed the compact hidden camera from her shirt and connected it to a playback device. She pressed a button and the events of the evening unfolded on the screen. The room was silent except for the recording, Blake's sneering remarks, his thinly veiled threats, and his eventual demand for money echoed in the air. The video continued until the moment he pulled his weapon, the unmistakable proof of his abuse of power. Harper's brow furrowed deeper as the recording played. When it ended, he let out a long, heavy sigh. This is unacceptable, he said, his voice strained. His abuse of power is bad enough, but the intimidation, the extortion attempt, this goes far beyond misconduct. Monica nodded, her face calm but resolute. This isn't just about me, she said. It's about the culture that allowed someone like Blake to feel untouchable. This needs to be addressed, Chief Harper, not just for today, but for the future. Harper's face softened slightly, a flicker of agreement in his eyes. You're right, he said quietly. I'll ensure this is handled appropriately. Blake will face charges, and I'll personally review the department's conduct policies. Monica offered a small nod, satisfied but not complacent. She knew this was a step in the right direction, but there was still much work to be done. As Monica left the precinct and stepped into the cool night air, she felt a mix of emotions, relief, anger, and a steadfast determination to keep fighting for justice. The quiet streets of Silver Heights seemed almost peaceful now, but Monica knew the fight against prejudice and abuse of power was far from over. Each encounter like this was a reminder of the work that still needed to be done. As she walked home, her steps steady and her head held high, Monica felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced injustice head-on, and while this was just one battle, it was a victory that mattered. For Monica Johnson, the fight wasn't just about the law. It was about creating a world where everyone, no matter their race, could live without fear. Monica Johnson, a veteran FBI agent, was jogging through Silver Heights on a quiet afternoon. The upscale neighborhood, known for its large homes and manicured lawns, offered a peaceful escape. It had been a week since Monica had moved into the area, and she was enjoying the tranquility of her surroundings. As she jogged, a police siren suddenly pierced the quiet. Monica stopped and turned to see a police car parked across the street. A white officer stepped out and approached her. He stared at Monica with suspicion, scrutinizing her every move. Monica felt a wave of unease, but maintained her composure. The officer questioned her presence in the neighborhood, demanding to know if she lived there. Despite being unsettled, Monica calmly explained that she had recently moved into the area. Yet the officer's behavior seemed to grow increasingly hostile. He continued to question her, crossing his arms and glaring at her as though she didn't belong in the neighborhood. Monica could feel the tension building, and her professional instincts began to kick in. She subtly activated a hidden camera on her clothing, knowing that recording the incident would be crucial. The officer then revealed his true intentions. He suggested that Monica needed protection in exchange for money, a clear demand for a bribe. His tone was condescending and dismissive, and Monica immediately recognized the racist undertones of his words. This wasn't just a personal issue. It was about an abuse of power. She knew she had to stay calm. The officer's demeanor was escalating, but Monica kept her cool, aware that the situation was being documented. He grew more aggressive, threatening her with trouble if she didn't comply. Monica resisted, choosing not to back down and not to let this abuse slide. Things took a dangerous turn when the officer drew his weapon and aimed it at her. But Monica didn't panic. Her years of experience as an FBI agent had taught her how to stay calm under pressure. She raised her hands in a non-threatening manner, carefully avoiding any sudden movements. The officer continued to grow increasingly hostile, his anger flaring. But Monica knew she had the upper hand. She remained composed, knowing that the camera was recording everything. In that moment, she took control of the situation, preparing to make sure the officer faced the consequences of his actions. When backup arrived, 2 officers quickly assessed the situation. Monica remained vigilant, ensuring the entire exchange was properly documented. Blake, the officer who had harassed her, was arrested and taken into custody. Monica remained calm but resolute, watching as he was led away in handcuffs. The local police chief arrived shortly after and reviewed the footage. It was clear that the officer had overstepped his bounds, abusing his position of power. The video served as undeniable evidence of the officer's misconduct, and Monica knew that justice would be served. The news of the incident spread like wildfire. Outrage poured in from all corners, and Monica's story became a symbol of standing up against racism and abuse of power. People across the community, even those who had never seen the issue before, began to acknowledge the problem of discrimination in their own neighborhood. Blake Carter's trial was swift. The video provided all the evidence needed, and the officer was sentenced to prison for his crimes. Monica watched from a distance, knowing that this was only the beginning. She had fought for herself, but more importantly, she had fought for the greater cause of justice. In the months that followed, Monica's life was forever changed. She realized that being an FBI agent was no longer just about solving cases, it was about taking a stand for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Determined to make a difference, Monica founded Justice Without Borders, an organization dedicated to helping victims of racial injustice and abuse of power. She traveled the country, speaking at schools, conferences, and community events, sharing her story and the importance of standing up for what is right. Her movement grew, and Monica's fight for justice became a powerful call for change, one that inspired others to stand up, speak out, and work together toward a better future. Monica's courageous stand against injustice quickly became an inspiration to many. She received countless emails thanking her for the strength to face the wrongs she had endured, and for bringing attention to the systemic issues of racism and abuse of power. People shared how her story had inspired them to confront the wrongs they had silently endured for years. In Monica's former neighborhood, several residents reached out to express their remorse. One elderly woman, Helen, approached Monica in person and tearfully apologized for her previous inaction when she witnessed Blake's harassment. Helen admitted that she had once believed the problem had nothing to do with her, but now she realized that her silence had been part of the issue. This recognition was a testament to the ripple effect Monica's bravery had sparked in her community. Under increasing public pressure, Blake's local police department launched an internal investigation. It uncovered multiple violations of police conduct and management's failure to address the abuses. Several of Blake's colleagues were suspended for either covering up or being complicit in his actions. Thanks to Monica's tireless advocacy and the work of her organization, A new bill was introduced at the state level. The bill mandated that all police officers wear body cameras during their shifts, ensuring greater accountability and transparency in law enforcement. Monica became a leading advocate for the bill, frequently appearing before lawmakers to push for its passage. She emphasized that justice couldn't remain just a theoretical concept. It needed to be implemented, and those who administered it had to be monitored to ensure they upheld their responsibilities. The bill was passed, marking a significant victory for police accountability and transparency. Yet, despite these monumental achievements, Monica found herself facing personal struggles. The constant pressure to create change, combined with the emotional toll of her work, left her feeling exhausted at times. There were moments when she doubted whether her efforts could truly change the world. But each time she felt overwhelmed, Monica found the strength to carry on by reading the thank you letters that poured in from people she had inspired. One evening, after returning home from a speaking engagement, Monica opened a letter from a 12-year-old girl named Chloe. The young girl had been bullied at school because of the color of her skin, but after hearing Monica's story, Chloe found the courage to stand up for herself. The letter ended with, "You are my hero, and I want to be one too." Monica wiped tears from her eyes, deeply moved by Chloe's words. The letter reminded her that small actions, like sharing her story and standing up for what was right, could have a profound impact on others. The power of her voice had reached someone in need, giving them the strength to fight their own battles. 3 years after the Blake incident, Monica was invited to speak at a national conference on criminal justice reform. The event was attended by hundreds of individuals passionate about creating change in the justice system. Monica concluded her speech with a powerful message. Justice does not happen by itself. We must fight for it. We must be brave, even when we stand alone. But remember, when you dare to stand up, you are never truly alone. Every step we take creates new paths for others to follow. As Monica spoke, the entire auditorium stood in applause, a collective display of solidarity and hope. She stood there, feeling the weight of unity and the hope for a better future. Monica knew the journey ahead would be challenging, but she was certain of one thing. She was